Hello and welcome to this special discussion on India at 100, the dream of a Viksit Bharat as elucidated by the government and several other areas. We have with us a very special guest, Sanjeev Krishan, who is the chairman of PwC in India, and Sanjeev will discuss with us what are the areas in which India can actually progress and what are the challenges and how India can navigate these challenges on the road to a developed India. The roadblocks and the ways in which we can actually overcome them and take it forward into this dream of a Viksit Bharat or a developed India. With me is my colleague, Managing Editor of Business Today, Anand Adhikari. Welcome, a warm welcome to you, Sanjeev. Let's dive right into the first steps of this Viksit Bharat dream, which we saw this year, which is the budget. What do you think the budget has actually taken care of some of the building blocks on which a developed India is going to be built?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Diving straight into the question that you asked, I think so. I think today, if you look at it, there were three big areas that possibly needed a lot more focus. We keep talking about India's demographic dividend. We keep talking about the challenges that India is going to face and the world is going to face, etc. One of the biggest issues is skilling people. And I think the endeavor to skill Indian youth, I think is a very noble one. Because, we did a survey some time back and it showed that even in India, almost approximately 1 in 2 people are currently underskilled for the jobs that they currently have. So, that's the extent of skilling needs that we currently have. Now, with disruptions like new technology interventions that are now coming along, I think that need will actually go up even further. Then, if you look at it with the social profile that we have and the demographics that we have, and how they can be more accretive, and how India would want this growth to be more inclusive, training them and making sure that they are also playing a part on the growth that India will have was very, very important. And I think that is what the budget seeks to do. I think the second one really was, to me, was the focus. We keep talking about MSMEs, and MSME is a very, it's a 4-letter word, but it could include a 1-person organization and a 1,000-person organization. Absolutely. As well. I think while we all acknowledge that they are so relevant. I think at times executing the focus on MSME needed a lot more effort, and I think there is clearly certain additional incentivization for the MSMEs. They are going to struggle. They are struggling, I must say, with all the transitions, including supply chain, the energy transitions, etc., etc. And the fact that we need to support them to make an inclusive India, that is part of the dream of Viksit India, was very important. And I think the budget sort of addressed that. And finally, I would say, also about furthering the agenda, that you are not looking back, that we're looking forward. I mean, when it looks to policy stability, when it talks about, one of the big things that we talk about is manufacturing competitiveness, and one of the big things there is that what are we doing on the manufacturing side, because the important thing is scale, and I think that's something which is also being encouraged. And to me, those are the three critical elements as I saw it, apart from many other things which were positives. We could always say that there were certain other things that could have been done, etc. But then that can always, in hindsight, we can always say that.
You said that skilling needs will go up further. So are you referring to AI and let's say Industry 4.0, which will require altogether different skills?
Well, I think certainly AI is one part of it, right? But even now there are industry captains who say that they are missing, let's say thousands of workmen. Even on the shop floors, right? Skilled people, right? So yes, AI is one part of it, but I would say that it is more than AI. Even today, for the kind of needs that Indian businesses have, and not all of them have adopted technology in the way they possibly could at the moment. I think even there's a need for skilled workmen. And of course, you look at what's happening on the services side today. When you look at, let's look at India's GCC industry, for instance, right? From being just on the cost arbitrage side, I mean, we are doing R&D and so on and so forth, big things, right? That will require a different level of skilling, etc. So yes, we are proud of all the engineering education establishments that we have across the country, but they will also have to ramp up and keep pace with what the services industry also need. So there is a need on the manufacturing side and there is a need on the services side both. And yes, you're right. I mean, AI is going to be another disruptor. And, in some ways, it is going to create, to my mind, it's not something to fear. It's something to me which I think certainly needs to be embraced, because no technology, at least to my mind, has taken away opportunity. I think it's only created opportunity. And I think if we embrace it, it hopefully can create more opportunity and productivity, something that we can talk about more in due course.
With guardrails.
Absolutely. I mean, trust, from my perspective, I mean, trust is a big thing. And trust in everything that AI can do is very, very important. And, there could be a huge amount of simply employment generation happening and upskilling needed to make sure that AI can be trusted and hence it can be leveraged in the way people say it can be.
Sanjeev, you deal with, in your role, current role, as well as in your previous role in PwC, you've dealt with a lot of corporates, the top deck, right? What is the current mood you sense in the corporate boardrooms and in the corner rooms? Because while there is a lot of optimism, and this is something we at Business Today have also sort of sensed, while there is optimism, there is also a lot of caution, because there are some headwinds which are currently there, more building up, etc. What is your sense?
So I think you summed it up quite well. Cautious optimism is how I'll put it. The fact that India is still slated to grow at 7% when the global economies are growing much slower is really something which stands out. The fact that we have a government which is largely a stable policy regime, etc., focused on execution, focused on improving productivity, reducing our factor costs of production, focusing on scale, something that we haven't done so far, etc., in the way that we're currently doing. I think these are all good things, right? And from a macro standpoint, I think the macro has been really well managed, I would say, including our fiscal situation, etc., which I think, the way it has been budgeted might have surprised a few with the way it has been budgeted, etc. And, year on year, we have seen that there is always some amount of cushion that the government has kept for anything that comes by during the course of the year. So I think all of those are good things. I think when we look at from a micro standpoint, I think there are 2 or 3 things which continue to be a bit of a bother. The first and foremost is potential geopolitical headwinds. One still doesn't know. I mean, unfortunately, over the last 30 months or so, we seem to be living in a world where we don't know what's going to come up next geopolitically and how people are going to react.
That is, in a sense, the new normal.
Oh, absolutely. And we were talking to amongst a bunch of people, and we said that disruption, we used to think one in 5 years. Now we say 1 in 5 months, right? And unfortunate that one has to deal with it, but it's not just the disruptions of technology, climate, and so on and so forth. It is also geopolitical and the positions that people take. I mean, there has been this huge debate on whether deglobalization is going to be a thing or it is already a thing, for instance, right? So that is something, because personally for me, I mean, deglobalization can never be a solution, but at the same time, one has to be ready for the fact that there may be somebody, I mean, you and I are doing something, but if you think in a particular way and you want to deglobalize, much as I want, I can't trade with you. And I think that's a bit of a concern in some ways. That's one. I think the second one is that if you look at it, inflationary pressures have continued in India, much as many parts of the world as well. And food inflation in particular has been a concern, etc. And we have done well, in terms of, people who've come through the poverty line and so on and so forth. But I'm sure that has a significant bearing on the decisions that get made even by the regulators, etc. So I think that's a concern. When we look at employment, and we just talked about skilling a little while back, I think that is something that I'm sure is in the minds, and that's where the whole apprenticeship scheme and others have come in really, and hopefully they'll come in handy. I think the biggest thing is that, which at some level also gets discussed, is that and I think that's a good thing that people are trying to be responsible. How do we make this growth inclusive, right? There has been some commentary on how post-COVID the growth has not been inclusive and have got stronger, and consolidation and so on and so forth.
Inequality debate.
So I think certainly there is a feeling that we need to make it inclusive. We need to onboard more and more to be part of us. Yes, my growth is good, but I can't survive unless you survive.
And Sanjeev, in the last decade, we have seen consolidation, in the telecom, in the cement. Now, if I look, let's say next 5-10 years down the line with corporates sitting on cash, do you see, consolidation happening? More consolidation in the sector?
So I think the first and foremost, I think many of the sectors pursuant to the insolvency laws which came in, have got reasonably consolidated. I mean, if you look at it, many of them did not get last mile funding, etc. They went through the insolvency process. Particularly if you look at steel, the power, and many of those, which were actually dead assets and dead capital for the country. I think they have managed to find a home. And I think that is where a significant amount of consolidation also happened pursuant to the insolvency laws coming in. There could obviously be more that could happen. We have seen some of the consolidation happening even in the startup phase when there was a funding winter, as many called it, etc. So I see a significant amount of consolidation which has already happened in the past. Now the question is that as many of these corporates deal with what we keep talking about as disruptions that are happening, the question really is that can I embrace a disruptor in the way that I do things a bit differently, right? Like
Capabilities, you're saying.
I would think so. I would think so because, like if I go back to the CEO survey which we launched in Davos earlier this year, over 40% of the global CEOs were saying that we don't expect to see our business run in the same shape and form in 10 years' time as it currently runs, which means that they're thinking that they need to reinvent their business. And now in terms of reinventing their business, yes, scale is very important, but more than scale, I think it is about how can I do my business differently, right? How do I reach my customers directly? There is a generational shift which is happening. How do I reach to that customer, for instance, differently? How do I reorganize my supply chains differently? Now, yes, that might mean, and we were just talking about inclusivity just a while back, that if my supplier is unable to green himself or herself, maybe I will just onboard it because I have CBAM to deal with. So I think some of that might result in a certain amount of consolidation, but not purely because you want to consolidate, there is a huge opportunity which is there. Yes, there will be specs, people will still go after brands and people will still go after, maybe a string of pearls kind of a thing. But I think the big consolidation, summary to your question, I think has happened.
And another thing you talked about this inclusive growth. Again, if I look, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, agri is a big area. I mean, a large population of India is dependent on agriculture. We saw, the agri bill in the past, which was again, strongly opposed by the opposition. Any thoughts, any ideas there on, how to reform or do you expect anything in the next, let's say, 5, 10 years on the agri side?
See, I think the agriculture, the gross value added, if I'm not mistaken, is about 18%, right? And I think there is a we have seen what happened with the services growth. We were not a services economy to begin with, right? But we have seen what services can do. I think agri possibly needs to be repositioned, right? And maybe by embracing productivity and doing a brand refresh on agriculture, by saying that, okay, how can you embrace technology in agriculture? We can actually do a little bit of that. Yes, the person on the farm in some ways needs to be made more secure. That this year we have had a good monsoon, but you obviously can get impacted by monsoon, but there are irrigation facilities, there is technology, there is insurance that is available to you. Now can we use AI, for instance, to secure the person who's working on the farm, etc., and get the benefits of technology to him, so that you can have a bumper year, you can have a cropper of a year, but how can you get some, how do you make it more of a straight line, if I may call it so? The second one, I think to me, is the productivity enhancements, which are very, very important. Because I think somewhere without productivity enhancements, just as we are saying on manufacturing, I think agriculture would always be in that range. It's always going to be range bound, right? And we have been seeing falling productivity. So to my mind, I think it is embracing technology in broader agriculture, etc., securing the person who the person who's actually working on the farm, etc., that his livelihood is going to be taken care of, and then using technology to create, plus on it, etc., etc.
Also climate resistant variants, etc.
Absolutely. And that's where I think the benefits of AI and other things will come into play, right? I mean, many insurance companies actually use it already, and you can fly in drones to say that where is it that you need help, etc., etc. So I think the combination of new technology has to enhance productivity in agriculture, and that will encourage more and more people to be on the farm, and the stress on urban infrastructure will also go down.
Right. And they are already using drones, insurance companies sort of for yield. I mean, to say, that's already happening.
Sanjeev, the other thing is we were recently speaking to Krishnamurthy Subramanian, the ED of India's ED in IMF and the former CEA. His thesis is India by 2047 can actually, if things go right and by his certain calculations, can even reach 55 trillion in terms of the GDP. Now, on the other hand, the World Bank warns that there is a significant risk, not just for India but other countries, of falling into a middle income trap unless it grows say 8 to 10% per year for over 10, 20, 30 years. Now, what is your sense? What is India going to look like in terms of GDP in around 2047, since that is the broad theme of our discussion as well?
So I would say, I love for that to happen, what you just mentioned. I would just say that we have sown the seeds or created the enablement, if I may call it so, on which we can now, at least in the next 10 years, leverage off it. Right now, we need to build on it. We need to continue to build on it. Whether it is our response to the climate crisis, the focus that and government actually has been leading much of that focus by investing. Whether it is the hydrogen mission which has come in, etc. Whether it's the EV policy, etc., which has come in. So I think we have been very, very alive to these shifts, etc. When we talk about supply chain, you look at how by domesticating the supply chain through the PLI and other, we have been trying to incentivize. Even now on semiconductor and some of the new energy areas, we have been very, very alive to it. Technology-wise, etc. India's UPI and the technology stack is now so well regarded. So I think the seeds have been sown to a large extent, and India's demographic profile will continue to exist at least for the next 20 to 25 years. So I think we have all the makings of it to be able to achieve it. I think the question really is of how can we execute it. So while you're talking about the broad ambition on GDP, just some time back we came up with what we called a Viksit framework for a $1 trillion merchandise exports. Services we are doing well, but we said merchandise export. And we said, let's call it the Viksit framework. And we said value addition. How do you increase value and how do you focus more on innovation and research to be able to enhance the value that you create in India before you export anything, right? When we talk about it is about how do you create greater enablement on infrastructure, right? Whether it is a last mile or whether it is something else. I think that becomes very, very important. K is all about knowledge, that how do we continue to skill our people, and that's we spoke about it. S, when we said S, it is all about being socially aware, considering that the world is moving, particularly Europe, and post that maybe other parts of the world as well. To make sure that we are socially aware, and at the same time we are aware that sustainability is going to be a very big thing. Then when we talk about I, it is about making sure that there is very clear focus on embracing some of the shifts that have happened on the technology side and making sure that we are able to bring it in infrastructure and manufacturing and create efficiencies around it. When we talk about the broader T, you look at technology, but you also look at what it can create for you. And one of the big things that you talk about is trust. One of the examples that I'd love to give is that imagine that we procured something from a farm, a green farm, a produce. We say that farm to table, and let's say farm to table in the US. Let's talk about it, and that goes to India's export and the aspiration that we have. A green farm, which is then produced in an organic place, etc. And organically it grows. It is stored in a warehouse, etc., which is prim and proper, etc. Then it goes through an export process, and all of this can be certified by using blockchain. Right? That it has been done in a sustainable way. It is being done in an inclusive way. There's no child labor. There has been women employment, this, that, and the other. Now, just imagine that even for that produce, if it goes to, let's say, I'm just giving an example, at a dining table in the US, etc., I'm sure they'll be willing to pay some amount of premium for the produce. It is generated in India. It has been driven in a sustainable way. There is inclusiveness in it, etc. India's infrastructure, India's scale, India's competitive logistics will come into play.
And there is an audit of the entire process.
And there is a trail through blockchain that the person can see on the other side and have greater confidence that yes, it meets everything.
That's
because
the trust you're talking
that's a trust.
And just to add on that, the middle income trap, so despite being the fifth largest, economy in the world, if you see the per capita, we are still on the lower income side. How do you think, things moving, let's say from lower to upper income, bracket? let's say next 5-10 years? Will it happen, or like you have said, seeds have been sown? So
yeah, I think so. I think it's a lot of it that has got to do with, I mean, over the last 20-25 years, we have seen that, right? I mean, that's why we have seen, many villages become towns, and of course, towns become cities, right? I mean, we have seen that growth, etc., happening. But see, I think a large part of that, to my mind, has been, as I said, services driven, and I think which is something which we should continue to actually create greater enablement for, because as India's youth continues to get educated, and I think education, which I call soft infrastructure, is very important, and together with healthcare, the focus on social infrastructure, which is education and healthcare, is important to make sure that India's demographic dividend continues to be harnessed, because it could become a challenge otherwise. And I think that if it happens at the micro level, right, will continue to create that ability for, as you said, the lower income groups to move to middle income groups, and so on and so forth. I think the one other thing which is very important is micro-entrepreneurship. And I say that because there is significant opportunity for micro-entrepreneurship in some of these, because not everybody, as I said, could be absorbed in bigger cities, etc., etc. And that will also cause inclusive growth, and that will also make sure that wherever there are the benefits of scale can at times be abused, let me put it that way. Micro-entrepreneurship done with the leverage of, for instance, I gave this example of farm to table. I mean, if we can leverage that, I think it will create a very conducive environment for upskilled, educated youth of India, maybe taking part of value chains and supply chains at the village level, at the town level, and supporting India's prosperity in times to come. And I think
also Sanjeev, startups may have a role to play in this. In aiding technology, maybe at the farm end also. There are these agri-tech startups which can come up, which have come up, and sort of pushing that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Startups have a big role to play, except that they get on the valuation game very quickly. But I completely agree.
But I think that's the good news. Is probably now people are talking about creating value rather than valuation. I think that's something. In fact, Bhavish Agarwal also spoke about at our India at 100 event, that he believes in creating value rather than chasing valuations. You spoke about supply chain, Sanjeev. I want to bring you to this issue of China +1, and I'm sure you've been asked this 100 times. But the economic survey came up with a very interesting theory, and others have also been talking about it, that instead of having this kind of adversarial relationship with China, why don't we bring China into as investors, and create assets on the ground with Chinese investments? What is your thought? Where do you stand on this?
See, I would say, I did mention earlier that I'm not a fan of deglobalization. I think that it's best when I can leverage your strengths and you can leverage my strengths in whichever way. Obviously, the challenge is that if you scratch my back, then I have to respond, and that's the geopolitical tensions that we have had with another neighbor. But I mean, purely economics. If you look at purely economics, yes, I would say that makes a lot of sense, because every country would try and leverage on their strengths. So if I think that I would focus on making myself almost green indispensable to the world, let's say, and that could be any country. I mean, the world will have to stop and take notice. I mean, if there is going to be equipment and there is going to be components which are going to be available, much as one would try, at very, very compelling competitive prices, etc., then you cannot say that I'll completely ignore them. I mean, even from a world trade, from a WTO obligation standpoint, there will be certain challenges that will come. So I think from that standpoint, it does make sense. But I would say at the same time that one has to be very, very conscious about the broader geopolitical reasons why it may not happen at the pace at which we want, etc. And we may want to be a bit calibrated. The other thing that I would also say is that I think the world, across the world, I think it's important for the world's value chains to survive, that there is a significant dependence on any one geography or any one country, let me put it that way, whosoever that may be. And I think, I do suppose that places like India, which have the ability to scale and which are making the investments, and many others, will come up as options for world's supply chains and value chains. And I think that's India's opportunity.
True. I mean, just another aspect of the economic survey, if one were to sort of look back a little bit on that, is that, a lot of the economic survey as well as the budget seems to lay stress on the private sector now coming in and playing its part in terms of pushing the growth agenda. The private sector, there have been green shoots, like you said, there have been areas where one has seen investments, but not yet at the pace at which one would have expected. Now, 11 lakh crore, 11.11 lakh crore, the government has been front loading investments year after year. But is the private sector responding? And what is your sense, since again, you speak to so many of them?
Yeah. No, I think you're right, sort of on that. And I heard the Prime Minister even imploring the private sector 10 days back that, it's something that, he seeks from us, from them. I think I would put it in two parts, really. See, capacity utilization, I did mention earlier on the consolidation point, I think it's got to about 77%, right? I think that's just about the time, around 80% is when most businesses start thinking that, okay, they need to be prepared because, otherwise, there'll be inflationary trends that their products might see, etc. And will be a missed opportunity for me. So I think we're getting to the stage. The challenge, albeit, has been that, the move to the 77%, I think 76.7% to be precise, has been a bit slower. Right, I think it's been a bit slow to catch up, etc., because many of us have been feeling that when will the private capital cycle revival happen in some ways. So I think it's been a bit slow to get to that, that vantage point. I think we are just about there. So I expect some of that to happen. Having said that, let me also say that if you look at areas like new energy, if you look at areas like semiconductor and where India is trying to reduce its import dependence, I think there has been very significant capex announcements as well, some of them in conjunction and joint venture with some global players as well. Of course, they have been supported very significantly by the government by way of incentivization and others, including state governments, I would say. But I would certainly say that those to me, because see, it's not enough for a semiconductor plant to be set up. There is an entire supply chain for the semiconductor plant which needs to come in. And I think that is also critical to our Viksit Bharat agenda, the thought process that we have. Because just as we saw in automotive, I mean, let's go back in time to when Maruti came in, right? I mean, when Maruti came in, the whole, NCR belt came about because the suppliers to them, etc., the OEM came through as well. So I think all of that will come through as well. And I'm quite sanguine that as we continue to invest in new energy areas, on areas like semiconductors, chips, and others, that itself will pivot, and at some level, as hopefully we cross the 80% capacity utilization, it will encourage even the more traditional capital sectors like steel and so on and so forth, etc. Mind you, I mean, there is significant challenges to them as well, because we talked about climate, etc. I mean, with for instance, with CBAM and others, etc., which is going to get extended to many other segments. I think there is going to be a greater need, etc., to do that, and also relook at their supply chains and their own business as well.
And Sanjeev, if I look at the last 20 years, the debt to GDP, I was looking at some data, has gone up, from 65 to now 80% level. Fiscal deficit also, if you see, we never have had this 3% level on a sustained basis. Yeah. How important is it to be fiscally prudent? When you are talking about all 2047 GDP targets.
See, I would put it out. First of all, I acknowledge that they have not been there. But the question is that I think if you look at the fiscal path that's been set, I think we've stayed true to it over the last few years, right? So it is progressive. I mean, obviously can't be night and day. I think we've made very fair progress on that path. And year after year, as we have seen, particularly in the recent budgets, I mean, we have done better than what we have actually budgeted. So I think that's a path that we have set for ourselves. And, I think it's really going to be, I don't think stopping investments could ever be the thing. And we want, we can't stop investments and we want to make it inclusive. I think it is about enhancing the gross value added, which is going to be key, right? And how can we actually enhance our GDP at a particular rate? We are saying 7% growth. Yes, I mean, Saurabh asked that question earlier, 10% growth. I'm sure there'll be a few speed bumps on the way somewhere, but I think we'll have to look at sustained growth of those levels to be able to achieve that, because it is really, I don't think that fiscal prudence should mean that we should be looking at, stopping investments or incapability building or capacity building, and we still have a fair way to go in terms of our logistics costs and factor costs, etc., etc. So I think there is still some work to be done, and that's why I'm saying that, let's continue to spend, as opposed to worrying too much about the fiscal deficit. We have done a reasonable job on that. That's the first thing. I think on the debt, yes, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, I've been noticing that household debt is going up in India in recent times, etc., and that's been an area of concern. See, I mean, truth be told, I mean, household incomes have also gone up significantly at this point in time. And well, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people will say that, a lot of those households are also sitting on significant healthier balance sheets, considering where public markets, for instance, have been over the last few years. So I think, yes, I mean, it's certainly the numbers are looking a lot worse than comparatively, relatively. But again, if you look at it, global averages, we are still doing much, much better. I mean, if you look at most of the global players, the developed world, we are still doing much, much better. So my thing would be that the aspirations of the households, the aspirations of the country, if we can have the right governance around the investments that we make, and the way we spend money, and I think currently I'm quite certain that that's there, etc. I think we're sort of quick to pull back also, and it's almost like if you have to, God forbid, if you're going to fail fast kind of a thing. I think we have the right governance in place. I'm quite okay.
Is there a big political risk, to our growth story? Because we have seen a long period, from 89 to 2014 of this coalition politics. In a way, the recent verdict shows that we are going back to the coalition era. Is there a political risk to our growth story in next 10, 15 years?
All I would say is that I think politicians of any color, etc., I think the fact that good economics is good politics, I think is now fairly evident, not just in India, but across the globe. And I have full confidence that, irrespective, I mean, we've seen that, right? I mean, see a few of the states, etc., many of the states which are even ruled by the opposition parties, etc., I think they have continued to focus on investing and, continuing to actually seek investments, etc., do those investor roadshows and so on and so forth. So I think I would like to believe that most of them believe that good economics causes good politics, and it should not come in the way of the aspiration that we have set for ourselves. And I think the trajectory that we have set ourselves the momentum itself will carry us forward quite a bit.
One last question before we wind up this discussion, Sanjeev, is on we spoke about climate a lot. Now, the net zero agenda of India. Now, where there is talk of $30 trillion being the requirement in terms of the funding requirement over the next several years. Where is the money going to come from? Because, it's one thing to say that we will do this, but it needs to be funded. What are the challenges there?
So I think, sort of you hit it on a very pertinent point, and I think I possibly would have said it on multiple occasions. I do believe that the Global South needs to voice this together, because while we go to every COP and there are discussions about the funding that should be available to, let's say, the Global South, and the fact that it is not really forthcoming, I mean, truth be told, there is a problem, right? I mean, even for the best corporate at this point in time, the best of corporates, I mean, what possibly is your arbitrage on your, cost if you're trying to put up a green plant? Maybe 5 bips, 10 bips. If you're really somebody who can somehow get anything better, maybe you'll get 20 bips, etc. I mean, that's not sufficient enough to the costs that are going to be incurred. And so well imagine that somebody who's not so fiscally strong, maybe this person can still do it, this organization can still do it, maybe somebody and we're talking about MSME and inclusive growth, etc. How will they do it, right? And I think that's a real challenge. The government can only do that much. It can create the enabling framework, enabling policies, etc., for that to happen. But I do acknowledge that at some level the developed world needs to own this up. And we talk about equality and so on and so forth, and we talk about inclusiveness, etc., etc. This is possibly as inclusive a need, because we are all global citizens.
The real test of it happening is going to be in this front.
And let me say that, it's not only that India which suffered with warm weather this summer, right? Europe did as well, as did the US. So there you are.
So there you have it. There are challenges along the way to a Viksit Bharat, but definitely the building blocks have been made, and I think corporate India is now ready to play its part in helping the government achieve that ambition. Thank you very much, and thank you, Sanjeev, for this wonderful discussion and the insights you've shared with us. Thank you.
Thank you.